again, and welcome to the 3D Printer Chat Show. I'm your host, Chris Garrett, and I'm here today with Ben Eadie. Ben Eadie is a special effects and 3D guru from Calgary. I'm sure he'll be embarrassed for me to say that. And got him here today to talk about all of those things: special effects, props building, mad science, and Guinness World Records. So how are you doing, Ben? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself, Chris?
I'm doing good. I'm fully caffeinated, so hopefully I'll not yawn during this. I've got my Tim Hortons coffee for the Canadians listening, and I'm looking forward to talking to you. Now, just a bit of background. Ben was the first person I ever met who had a 3D printer, and that was back a fair few years ago. It was also one of the first people I met when we moved to Canada, so simultaneously got to know Ben and his family, but also got to know 3D printing through Ben, which is awesome. So, Ben, tell us about that 3D printer, because it was a bit weird, right?
Yeah, I was looking at doing 3D printing years and years ago, and obviously it was really expensive. Now, I was doing CAD, or have been doing CAD since like the late 90s. So it's, I saw 3D printers in, they say, the early 2000s, and always interested and started seeing the development of homemade printers. And all of them seemed like, kind of odd and complex, and I don't know. But eventually came along this mini console, so it's a Delta style. And I was completely enamored with it. I watched a couple of videos, and it's got this sexy movement, so I had to have one. I joined the local makerspace, protospace in town, and then found out that they had a 3D printer, so I made the parts that I needed and built it myself, and cursed and swore and wanted to like punch holes in the wall, but eventually got it working. And I still have it to this day, and it's this little workhorse that keeps on going, and it makes just great prints.
But you had a 3D printer before that you were given, like, actually, didn't you have two and you had to cannibalize them to keep them working?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so I forgot about that. Years before that, there was a company called Solido, and what they did is they made this. Basically, it was a cellophane sheet, and it would cut out an outline and apply glue to the inside of this cut, and then lay another layer down and keep going, and you'd end up having this sort of plastic block that you'd have to break the actual 3D printer out of. So, long story short, or well, maybe not short, but I was running a few websites teaching SolidWorks at this point in time, and there was the company itself, the social media director I'd met at a conference, and he said, well, can we get you a demo unit? And, any self-respecting person will say, hell yeah. So,
and they weren't cheap, right? They were like
no,
serious industrial things.
yeah, they were between $10,000-$15,000 a piece. So they shipped me one, but it got smashed in transit. And I was sitting there and, kind of disappointed, and told them about it. And so they obviously started sending me another one right away and did the insurance claim. And in the meantime, I'm looking at this thing going, is it broken that bad? And I managed to get it kind of to hobble along and just do the basics. But just the basics was enough to print off the broken pieces. Like there was a foot that was all smashed up, and there was a couple other plastic pieces that were all smashed up. So I took them off, measured them, redid the CAD on them, and then I just printed them off. And I had it up and working. I think it was like a week before the other unit came to fix. So, they ended up using me as a bit of a case study, going, "Hey, look, you can smash your machine, but you can repair it with itself."
Yeah, it's a self-replicating machine. Except there were big like rolls of plastic.
Yeah.
So strange.
It was, these rolls of plastic. It's strange, but it kind of makes sense to me. So it's no longer at that point. I don't think it's considered additive manufacturing, because it's sort of like machining. You essentially got like the raw material, end up making a block, and then you kind of break the part out from the inside of it. And all the waste plastic is really not reusable. But if I recall, it was like a PVC. So you could just, obviously recycle it, and that wasn't a problem. But I think they still exist today. It's an interesting concept, but I don't think the business is done very well, and I think they're sort of in limbo.
but the output was really nice. I remember you made me like an iPad stand and a phone holder, and
Yeah.
they were like production run sort of quality. They weren't
Yeah.
homemade looking.
No, and the one thing that I really liked about it is you could do these things called live hinges. So you could print off, like, say, just you'd place a hinge that would be on the same plane as each layer. And what you'd end up doing is this, when you broke it out, you'd have, like, say, one or two layers that were bonded, and then there'd be a gap. And in that gap, you'd be able to fold things. So you could make, like, fold up boxes and all sorts of things. So think of, I don't know, plastic origami.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it was just awesome. And like FDM, yeah, you can do it with some stuff, but nothing to the level that had. And you're right, the quality it had was pretty outstanding. I'd say it was in between an FDM and the SLA style. So it wasn't quite as refined as SLA, but it was definitely better than the FDM.
Yeah, it reminded me of a vinyl cutter, but instead of just doing one two-dimensional layer, it was like doing layers and layers and layers. Amazing machine.
Yeah, that's a perfect analogy there. It's just, a vinyl cutter, except it just does layers and layers and stacks them for you.
Yeah.
So you don't have to glue it together.
So that was like 2010-ish. And then you took me to my first Maker Fair where we saw like robots and Arduinos and blinky lights. And then we went to the 3D printing room and I was like, I have to have one of these.
I remember you looking at me and going, "This is bad. This is very, very bad. Claire is going to kill you."
Well, yeah, and I was proven right. It was very bad and expensive. But that was like, I had no experience with the 3D world. You would come from the SolidWorks world, and you're kind of like less impressed, weren't you? I mean, I think you were really more keen on the laser cutter at that point.
Yeah, yep.
But
I was those too.
I was blown away. And, obviously the rest is history. But that different perspective, I think, has been really cool to like have an idea into the industrial world through you, because you have made real 3D things, tangible things as a career. You work now on movies, and there's some that we can talk about, some that we can't talk about, and TV shows, and like you blow things up and make 3D things for them.
I've got the coolest job. I really do. I'm not trying to be an ass, but like, this is reality.
Like through that SolidWorks stuff, you're doing like consulting for like motorcycle companies and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So, tell us. This is one of the other cool things that you did. You've got Guinness records for stuff that you've built, right?
Yeah. A few years before I met you, I was into recumbent bikes. I bounce around a lot. I don't know if I don't sleep much or what, but I was into recumbent bikes, and I was looking at a few forums, and there was this guy that said, I'm going to break a world record and stuff. And I was looking at his designs, and like they were good. They were very amateurish. He was missing some of the industrial design or mechanical design concepts, missing some of the rudimentary stuff. And I was reading, and then eventually he mentioned a few things that were landmarks in Calgary. And I thought, I wonder. So I emailed him, or I didn't email him. I contacted him through the forum and said, "Hey, are you in Calgary?" And the next day we're having coffee together, and he was talking about what he wanted to do. And I said, all things considered, I go, "I love your projects, but like, you're a bit of an amateur on the design side. Do you want some help with that?" And he was just like, "Oh my God, yes." So we sort of partnered up. He's the OCD type. I'm obviously ADD. So we made a great team, and we started designing bikes, and he'd run a few ideas past me and back and forth. And eventually we got to this bike with a fairing on it. And he's a very accomplished athlete. He's an Ironman Kona athlete, and he's done ultra marathons and the whole bit. So he did a bunch of training, and our first attempt was a failure. We ended up having the bike crash because of a chain derailment of all things, like a minor thing, but it's amazing what happens. And so the following year, we fixed that one small mechanical issue, and we did 1,046 kilometers in 24 hours. I think that's around 650 miles, just one guy pedaling a bike. And from that, like when we did that, there was also a secondary record sort of underneath that where it was the fastest person to ever reach 1,000 kilometers under his own power. So we ended up with 2 records there. And then he started thinking, I want to do sea, land, and air. So, we're still talking about air, but we've accomplished the sea side. And what we ended up doing was we took a kayak and we designed it with a pedal mechanism on it and a prop. And he did 1,000, or not 1,000, what am I saying? 174 miles, I think 240 kilometers in 24 hours on a boat. Obviously, water's much harder to move through. So, we did that. And then, unfortunately for him, or not, halfway through the record, I realized some major errors that we had made in calculations and stuff, and that we could do much, much better. So the following year, we rebuilt a boat, and we ended up breaking that record. So we started out, we broke the record at 174 kilometers, and the second record we did 249, 46, somewhere in there. I can't remember the exact numbers. So that was where those 2 numbers came from.
Cool.
And actually, this summer, in fact, probably in a couple of weeks, he's going to be trying to break his own record again down in LA somewhere in a lake with a boat. But I haven't had anything to do with that one. I've been kind of busy on other tangents.
Yeah, so that's a good segue into what you've been doing recently. Can you tell us a bit about what you've been doing? Obviously, the stuff that you can talk about, not the stuff that you can't talk about. You've got a page on IMDb, which to me is like 1,000 times cooler than having a page on Wikipedia.
Well, a few years back, a friend of mine here in Calgary was working on the Revenant movie, and she was talking to the special effects coordinator and saying, "Well, we need a good, free thinker kind of artistic guy that's awesome in computer-aided design." And she said, "Well, you should talk to Ben." And so I get a phone call. It's like one of the best job interviews I've ever had. I get a phone call from a guy saying, "Hey, I'm going to need you to send me a resume." And that's how it started out. And at the end of the conversation, he's like, "I'm going to fly you out on Monday and you can start." And I'm like, "What movie are we going to work on? Or what movie is this for?" And he's like, "I can't tell you." So when I arrived, I found out it was Star Trek Beyond. And I was over the
Let's just pause there because, Star Trek, we're nerds. That's like saying we're going to send you back in time, like to 2,000 years ago, to the birth of your deity. It's like.
And 2 weeks later, I'm at a bowling hall with Simon Pegg talking geekery. It was just like, oh my god, this is so cool. Sorry for the swear.
No, it's fine. Yeah, that was awesome, but it's not the only thing you've done. You've worked on like other very nerdy, very cool things.
Yeah, so I've done Legends of Tomorrow TV show, just a couple episodes on that. I've done, Maze Runner, or parts of Maze Runner, and Death Note, which will be coming out on Netflix soon. And the last show I was working on, my contract is done, so I can mention what show I was working on. I can't necessarily mention what I did on it, but it's the next Predator movie that's coming out. And
that's going to be so cool.
Is that cool?
Yeah. I mean, for the cosplay as well, especially, that is going to be, that's going to be. So let's just talk a little bit about one of the things that you did on Star Trek, which was a huge gimbal. Didn't that either get a Guinness record or was potentially up for a Guinness record?
Yeah. It wasn't a gimbal. I ended up designing a very large rotating set. There's some scenes where they're getting tossed around in the hallways of the Enterprise, and the set itself was, I think, 30 feet in diameter and 100 feet long. It was this giant rotating frame. Basically, think of a giant tube with an arched set inside of it, and we needed it to rotate back and forth, so it was like they were being tumbled around inside the spaceship.
And was that like pneumatic or hydraulic? Or?
It was hydraulic. We ended up. This is a kind of funny because the boss calls me into the office and said, "Well, we're going to need a motor to move this." And I said, "Yeah, it's going to take about 1,600 horsepower. It ain't going to be cheap." And so he says, "Okay, we'll do some research and figure out what you need." And I already knew what we needed to get. I talked to a couple of my oil and gas friends from some of the other designs and contracting I've done, and there's these Haglund hydraulic motors. So I went and got a couple quotes for them, and my heart sank when I was getting quotes for them because $250,000 was the minimum cost.
Yeah.
And so I went to the boss and said, look, we can get these, but they're 250 grand. He goes, awesome, buy two. I would sit there just dumbfounded going, pardon?
Yeah, that's a whole new world. But
Yeah.
you worked also on the motorbike, right?
Yeah, the PX90, I think it is. I ended up doing some 3D scanning of the motorbike itself and helping develop the new gas tank and some side panels and everything. And we ended up machining out a lot of the stuff, but there was some sort of 3D print prototypes that we'd done just to sort of get a feel for it. There's a lot to be said about making, like, even if it's not a finished product, is to have even a miniature in your hands, kind of to feel it and look at it and just sort of look at it in a different perspective than on a computer screen.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much that helps.
So in the film industry, a lot of people use like Industrial Light and Magic, and Pixar and stuff, or like the lower budget stuff. They use Blender. Are you using SolidWorks, or what are you using when you're doing this kind of stuff?
Well, it all depends. So it's sort of a mixture of things. Now, SolidWorks is the base thing that I'm using. Although very shortly, I see this new program called Onshape, which is a cloud-based CAD, is probably going to eat SolidWorks' lunch here.
Hmm.
But they don't. They're still sort of in their growth phase, and there's a few fundamentals that they don't have, like weldments, but it's coming along. So I could see myself moving on to that. But um, when you're working with art departments and stuff, they use things like ZBrush and a lot of Autodesk products as far as doing the 3D organic modeling. And to interface back and forth, there's some other software that's reasonably expensive called Rhino.
Yeah.
And Rhino works great as a translator between the organics and the mechanical systems. So, I'm functional in a lot of different packages, but SolidWorks is definitely my strength. Onshape as well. But I can work in any CAD system. It's just a matter of give it to me, let me figure out the basics, and then away we go.
Yeah, and I think Rhino's more CAD, right? More like AutoCAD-y sort of use,
Yeah.
whereas like ZBrush is character design and organic, and
hmm
so you're switching between like SolidWorks, which is like engineering, and you're using all these different things, but you think Onshape might be potentially going to take over from SolidWorks?
I hesitate to say the way things will go. It's almost
Yeah,
impossible to predict the future. But I the way SolidWorks works as far as the financing model goes and how friendly they are to makers and their usability and support. I've been using them since like the late 90s, and I've loved the product, but it's frustrating trying to get help with them now. So Onshape is actually being designed by the original creators of SolidWorks, and they happen to be friends of mine because I ended up speaking at a few of the conferences, and then they we befriended each other and went out for a few pints and stuff during the conference. So they invited me to the early alpha testing of Onshape, and wanted to my feedback of how everything's going to go. And I was just, my jaw hit the table. I'm just like, wow, this is amazing. And they told me the price point. I was just like, oh my god, sign me up.
yeah,
So I've been using it since I'd say within a year of its first inception.
yeah. So for like the 3D printing people, the people who are just getting into like creating their own models, is that what you would advise people to go into then on Shape?
Absolutely. That's my number one recommendation right now. Part of it is that they have a great model where it's a freemium type of thing, where you can use the full on package, no dumbed down versions, no restrictions, and make your own models. The only catch 22 on this is that your models, if you're doing it free, are public, so anybody in the world can see them. It's sort of like, imagine a 3D Facebook
Yeah,
kind of concept. Now, for me, is that what I can do is I've got a paid version, so I can hide the models. And then what I can also do, though, is I can make a 3D model and I can share it with somebody, and they can edit it back and forth. And if they have a paid version, everything remains under a paid sort of rule system, and you don't you don't end up losing the intellectual property of this. Basically, I'm going into the whole business side of things. Here's what it boils down to. If you want to make money, it's like $100 a month, not a big deal for CAD. If you're not making money and you just want to learn how to use it for free.
Yeah.
And you can switch it on and off for different projects. So if you're only going to use it for half a year, then pay for half a year. And then when you shut it off, all those models and everything are still going to be considered they're still going to be considered hidden, and nobody's going to be able to get at them. You're still going to have access to them, but to edit them, you'll just have to start up your account again. And there's no penalties for starting up 5 years later, and you just set everything basically in cold storage. You're like, yeah, cool, here, buy another month, and we'll unlock it for you.
Yeah,
which is just like, thank you.
When you showed me actually working on a model, I could see all the changes you were making, but I was at home, you were at your office, and I could see all the changes, and you're saying, do this, do that, and we could both collaborate. I think that is absolutely massive for education and for people teaming up, and like for the open source hardware side of what we do. I think that's amazing. I mean, I in my 3D workshop, I spend a lot of time on Tinkercad, but this is really the next phase from people who just want to put some primitives together and make a thing to actually designing a thing. It's got all that parametric side, right?
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely does. And you brought one thing up I should always mention is that being able to have two people work on a model simultaneously, like I can work on one sketch that creates a certain feature. You can also work on that same sketch at the exact same time. We can make changes and everything's live. So it has this dynamic sort of collaborative that no other CAD has. Like, amazing as far as that goes.
And that full history that you can go back and say, okay, we got the wrong measurement here, we can go back and change it, and everything else fits together. So just coming up to the end of this episode, I could talk to you for hours, and we do. We go to the coffee shop and we eat donuts, and we do talk for hours. But just want to finish up with the benefit of your experience, right? So what do you think are the biggest mistakes people make in their 3D designs when they're designing objects? What do you think is the biggest reason people fail and they have to have all that frustration and go back and like too many prototypes?
Well, at the risk of being, waxing philosophical here, is that the biggest thing that I think a lot of people do is that they want to have it perfect the first time. Here's the number one concept, is that you're going to fail, and you're going to fail constantly, and you just need to embrace and love that failure. There's a million modeling tricks that somebody can teach you, and you can become the best modeler in the world. It doesn't matter. You're going to fail on the first few. So accept that your first prototype's not going to work. And just get in there and start doing some stuff. I speak at schools and conferences, and my favorite speech is fail your way to success, because my whole mandate is like, people say, well, you're so talented, or you did this or did that. It's embarrassing, because I'm not that talented. I'm not that special. Here's the defining thing that I see that I have that nobody else does, is that I embrace failure. I fail constantly, and I laugh at it. And I'd be lying to say, like, I want to punch things. I want to, throw an adult temper tantrum, but be damned if it's going to stop me. Just keep going.
Yeah. And you even see people in the special effects industry that have like a rigid mindset, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. You're going to have these people. Like, they talk like the special effects industry is so progressive, yet when you're in it and you go, hey, I've got these 3D printers. They're like, oh, yeah, we tried it a few years ago. It doesn't work, and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, well, you didn't have the right guy showing you what you needed. Just give me a chance.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of people are just, you get stuck in your ways. Even I do. And sometimes it just takes sort of like somebody to slap you and go, hey, you know what? You should try this and see what's going on.
I'm always here if you need a slap, Ben. That first call.
Okay, you can slap me, but I need a coffee to go with it.
Okay, deal. Well, we've come up time, and I'm sure we'll have you back on again, because it's great talking to you, getting the benefit of your experience. Is there anything cool you're doing next, or anything that you want to talk about?
Yeah, there's, now that I've got a little bit of time off. My work takes me to Vancouver, and I live in Calgary, so I don't spend as much time with my family as I want. So right now, I'm developing a course. Now, whether this is happening for sure or not, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments of this podcast. Is that I'm thinking I'm going to start teaching Onshape as a course, just to sort of Onshape for makers or Onshape for 3D printers, and just get people up to speed and kind of moving along. And so I'm going to develop a course, and let me know if you'd be interested in something like that, because that's something that it'd be nice to spend a little more time at home. Don't get me wrong, I'm still going to be doing movies. It's way too much fun, but I'd like to spend more time at home. So
I'll be a first student. That's a deal for you.
okay, there's certain people I can teach, and well, Chris. Okay, yeah, okay.
I'll twist your arm. Donuts and coffee. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you everybody else for listening, and please do review us, share, like us, and most of all, listen next time on our next episode. Thanks everybody.
See you guys.